Rabbi Shimon Lazar said over in the name of Rav Meir that that Rav Chelva said in the name of Rav Huna, he saw that he made the parts of the mezuzah. There's two paragraphs, and he made them stumos, meaning you can either start the new paragraph on the next line or do it on the same line. But he would do it on the same line. But then we have that Rav Meir, he would do it. The parshos would be psuchos. So we have Rav Meir would start a new paragraph on the new line. So now, Amarti l'Rebbe, why? Matam Amarli Hovein Smuchos Min HaTorah. So he told them that these two parshas are not next to each other in the Torah. So therefore, he made them on a new paragraph. Now, V'amrav Chana Amarav Halacha Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who told us that that Rav Meir, who said over in the name of Rav Meir, that he would write them open and not closed. So now we're asking, Ma'i lav apsuchos? When he says the halacha is like him, is he not talking about the psuchos? Is he not talking about the halacha regarding starting the second paragraph on a new line? And if that would be true, so that's a question on the statement on the end of the previous page from Rav Chelbo, saw Rav Huna making them closed. And yet we're saying the halacha is like Rav Meir, who starts them on a new line, not on the same line. So
Rabbi Gleizer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm confused where we are. I missed out if you said in the beginning. I'm still looking for it.
32a.
32a?
Yeah.
Thank you.
5 lines in. So,
okay,
my lava pnuchos lo arevach. When we said the halacha is like that, he made them open. It wasn't talking about starting on a new paragraph. Rather, it was talking about the revach. The revach is the space that one has. I think it's talking about the space under, right at the end of the parchment, having a space at the end, but not the fact that he was starting on a new line. Is that correct? (32a). Right.
That's what I think is right in the top space and the bottom space.
Okay. So the Kama Reva, how much is that space? Amar Rav Menashe bar Yaakov, Amila, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yaakov. It's Kimole Atava de Sifri. It's the size of a gluon in Old French. It's a clip, like the little clip of a sofa. It's a little tool. So a small little space that you have to make at the end. Okay. Amar le Abayler of Yosef, va'at lo tizbara d'chiyamar Rav arevach. So he told him, Abai said to Rav Yosef, va'at lo tizbara, you don't think d'chiyamar Rav, that when Rav said his statement, it was a revach? You don't think that when Rav said his statement, it was going on the space, meaning, where was Rav? Rav was. Yeah, so Abai says Rav Yosef, and you don't think that he Amar Rav, that when Rav said his statement, the Chiyamar Rav Arevach. Where was Rav? 1 second. Yeah, Rav said the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So Rav said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar earlier, that it was going not on the openings, not on the starting on a new line, but rather keeping a space at the end of the mezuzah. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, you don't think the Chiyamar Rav Arevach? I mean, you thought to read this in some kind of different way, and therefore we had a question. how could Rav not hold that you make a space at the end of the mezuzah? The Harav Islay Minhaga. Rav holds that the custom of the day will determine the halacha. If the customs like that, he follows that. The ha'idna nahuk alma bestumos. And nowadays the minhag is that when you write the mezuzah, you don't start on the new line. You start on the same line. So that's the custom. So Rav himself, when he says that the halacha was like Rav Shimon and Elazar, of course he's talking not about openings, rather he's talking about the space at the end. And we had this issue. This question was that we had Rav Meir he was writing the parshios that were open, and Rav said the halacha is like Rav Shimon and Elazar, who said in the name of Rav Meir different halachas, and we said the halacha is like Rav Shimon and Elazar. So we asked, don't you see that the halacha is like him, that the parshas are open? Now, open we thought meant was you start the second paragraph on a new line. That we had a question on the previous statement. That we said, no, open means there's a space when you finish the mezuzah. That's all it meant. So we're saying now, of course, Rav holds that it was closed, not open. How did you even interpret it like that? That Rav said something that the halacha is like Rav Shimon and Elazar, that the paragraph should start on the next line. The custom is not that way. The custom is they start on the same line. So of course, when Rav said that statement, he meant that there's an opening there's a space after the writing of the mezuzah. Now, we're going to prove to you that Rav holds that what the custom is will determine the halacha from an interesting thing. So chalitza, we use a shoe. Now, you can use two shoes, hard leather and soft leather. One's called a minnow, soft leather, and one's kind of sandal, hard leather. We call it a sandal. It's not really true, but it's different way they're shaped. So now we're going to bring halachas about that just to show you that what the custom is we do. And therefore, once you prove that Rav goes like the custom is, so therefore earlier when it said that we make the mezuzah open, and Rav says halachas like that, it couldn't mean open in a new paragraph. It must be open at the end of the writing. There was a space, because the minhag is that we write them on closed paragraphs on the same. You start the new paragraph on the same line with a small space, not in a new paragraph. Okay, so now the Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. So this is Rav comes in. Let's say Im Yavo Eliyahu, if Eliyahu Navi would come, Vayomer Choltzin b'minol, you should do chalitza with a shoe. Shomin lo, we'll listen to him. If he says Ein Choltzin b'sandal, don't do chalitza with the sandal, the hard leather. Ein shomin lo, we don't listen to him. Why? Shikvar nagu am b'sandal. The nation has already, the custom is that they use a sandal. They used the hard leather. I think there was a decree that was made on the other type of shoe, so we only started using hard leather, not soft leather. So the minhag was we use a sandal. So if he comes to change the minhag, we say, sorry, we're not listening. So that is a statement of Rav. V'Rav Yosef Amar Rav Kahana Marav. So either it's Rabba Amar Rav Kahana Marav, or it's Rav Yosef Amar Rav Kahana Marav. So both people in the name of Rav Kahana, in the name of Rav. He has a slight difference in the story. Im Yavo Eliyahu, if Eliyahu came to you and says, Vayomer, Ein Choltzin b'minol, you cannot do chalitza with a minol. So then, Shomin lo, we'll listen to him. If he says Ein Choltzin b'sandal, you shouldn't do chalitza with a sandal. Ein Shomin lo, shekvar nogu ha'am b'sandal. So now, both of these versions of Rav Kahana, in the name of Rav, had two parts to them. The second part is the same. If Eliyahu Navi comes and says that you should not use a sandal, we do not listen to him. That's what we needed for our purposes. However, there's a difference in the first of the two statements between these two versions. The first one stated if he comes and tells you, use a minal, use a shoe, we'll listen to him. And the second version was, if he says, we don't use a shoe, we listen to him. So either it's use a shoe, we'll listen to him, or if it's don't use a shoe, so we'll listen to him. So it says the Gemara, my beinayu, between those two statements, use a shoe, we'll listen, don't use a shoe, we'll listen, soft leather shoe. So we say, minal lechatchila ika beinayu. The difference is, can you go ahead and use a shoe, lechatchila, meaning, can you ideally use a shoe, or it's only if you have nothing else? So Rashi helps us out a little bit. It says, if you say the first opinion that Eliyahu says, use a shoe, and you listen to him, that means that until he comes and says that, we're not using the shoe, we're using the sandal. If he comes and says, use the shoe, okay, we'll listen to him. The other opinion says, if he says not to use a shoe, so then we'll listen to him. That means that even when he doesn't come, even until that point, we're still allowed to lechatchila use a shoe. That's a small difference between those two statements. Okay, but what do you see that Rav clearly states that if the custom is to use a sandal, even against Eliyahu Hanavi, we are not going to change the minhag. So you see, Rav goes like the minhag. So too, when Rav said that the halacha is like a Shimon Elazar, and the wording of the brisa was Parshioseha Pesuchos, the parshas are open. So what does open mean? Did open mean start a new paragraph, or does open mean put a space at the end of all the writing? So obviously, Rav can only hold that it means put a space at the end of the writing, because the custom was to start the second paragraph on the same line. It was a stumos, not a psuchos. It was closed, not open. So that's obviously how you would read that brisa. Elalav shmamina, arevach shmamina. That which Rav said in the name of Shimon Elazar was teaching you that you make a space at the end, like the size of the clips of the sofa, and you start the second paragraph on the same line and not on a different line. Okay. Now, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak has another reconciliation. He says, Amar mitzvah la'asosan stumos. The mitzvah is to do stumos, to start it on the same line. However, v'yav dinu psuchos shapir dami. If you were to make them open, that's also good. So that's why you could have that Rav Chelbo saw Rav Huna and they were closed. Rav Meir was doing it open. He had them open. And we say the halacha is like Rav Shimon Elazar. Rav said the halacha is like Rav Shimon Elazar, which we were bothered by. It sounds like you can make them open, not closed. So we answer, no. The best to do is to make it closed, meaning on the same line, not on a new line. If you make it open, that's okay too. So that my psuchos the Amar Rabbi Shimon Elazar, when we had that brisa, the second line of the page, when it said you make them psuchos, you make them open. So it sounds like you should do that ideally. You should ideally make them open. So we say you have to amend the brisa. It means the Amar Rabbi Shimon Elazar af psuchos. You can even make them open. You don't better to make them closed. But if for whatever reason you're stuck or there's no more room or and you make them, or you just didn't realize, or whatever it is, and you make the new paragraph, the second paragraph on a new line, that's also going to be okay.
So psuchos also like that's amount of space we said at the bottom, the revach, that will just be with the psuchos, like just the rest of the line, right?
No
There's
relevance, no relevance. Two separate halachas. One is when you have the second paragraph of the mezuzah, do you put it on the new line or on the same line? And one is when you finish writing the whole mezuzah, you put a small little space at the end.
Oh, okay. We're talking about starting the second paragraph. We're talking about stumos and psuchos, starting second paragraph. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to try to bring a support for such an idea. So lema misayele. 1 second. Yeah. Lema misayeles. Let's try to bring a support for this. That even though you should do it ideally, but if you don't, it'll be okay. So Kiyotzebo. Similarly, Sefer Torah Shabala. You have a Sefer Torah got worn out. You're not going to use it anymore. Or Tefillin Shabala, or Tefillin. They're just worn out. So instead of putting them in the Kesher cemetery, you want to maybe use some of it for something else. So in the Sefer Torah and in the Tefillin are the two paragraphs that are in a mezuzah. So I have an idea. Take the parchment from one, roll it up, put in your mezuzah, and you're good to go. Save some money. So Sefer Torah Shabala, the Tefillin Shabalu, ain't osin man mezuzah. You're not allowed to make from them a mezuzah. Why? Because a Sefer Torah and Tefillin have a higher level of holiness than a mezuzah. And the rule is you only go up in holiness and not down. So, lefisha ein moridin b'kedusha chamura lekedusha kala. Okay, so that's the halacha. Now we're going to say, but what would the implication be? Let's say you didn't have that rule, you didn't hold that rule, and you could go down from a higher level of sanctity to a lower level of sanctity. Let's say you could. So what would happen? But hamoridin osin. But if you were to go down from the sanctity, if you were allowed to go down from a sanctity of a Sefer Torah down to a mezuzah, it sounds like aside from that, there's no problem. You can take parchment, put into the mezuzah, and you're good to go. There's just this problem of not going down in sanctity. So it says the Gemara, but how could that be? How am I? Hachastumos v'hachapsuchos. Said, how could it be in the Sefer Torah? It's stumos. Those paragraphs are stumos. You don't start psuchos. You don't start on the next line. You start on the same line. And in a mezuzah, they are psuchos. Says the Gemara. What does that mean? So it sounds like. One second. So meaning, what do you see? You see that even something which is stumos, which is closed, meaning you can start on the same line, could be made into a mezuzah, which means that a little funny way of proving our point, but which means that when Rav Meir said that you make them psuchos, he didn't mean only psuchos. They can also be stumos. Remember, Rav Meir was the one that said that we saw Rav Meir making them psuchos. We're trying to figure out what did that mean exactly. So we just pointed out that psuchos didn't mean only psuchos, it meant also psuchos. So here too, we have an implication that you can take a Sefer Torah, which are stumos, which are closed, meaning they're on the same line, and that could be your mezuzah too. And therefore we have a proof that when Rav Meir said that they have to be made open, he didn't mean only open; it could be also open.
Because they're not consecutive.
Mm-hmm.
The Torah.
Right, that's a good point.
So what do
you'd cut it out, no?
If you cut it out, then you've got two.
And then you'd sew it together or something. That's a good point. That's a good point. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. You'd have to cut it out or something. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. So that was an attempted support that Rav Meir, when he said open, he also has in. So okay, so you cut it out, good. You cut it out and you sew it together, good. So Rav Meir himself, even Rav Meir holds that this idea of stumos and psuchos from this implication of this halacha. So says the Gemara, no, you have no proof from there because maybe all you see from there is Dilma lahashlin, ha moridin osin. Maybe it's only if you're missing some parts of the mezuzah, you could cut out from the Sefer Torah and put into the mezuzah. Meaning, aside from this halacha that you shouldn't do it, it sounds like. But if you did do it, so then it would work. So how would you do that? So maybe all it means is if you're lacking whatever, a line or something like that, you take out the Sefer Torah and you put it into the mezuzah. You don't see that you're going to take the entire two paragraphs, cut them, cut the parchment, sew it together, and then put it into the mezuzah. Maybe all you see is this. Hamarid and Osin. If you were to go down in Kedusha and you do it, sounds like that would be good. So says the Gemara, Hamarid and Osin, what? If you go down in sanctity, then it'll somehow be valid? How could that be? The Hatanya halacha l'Moshe Sinai. that they're made on different parchments, meaning we have the inner and the outer part. So what do you write a Sefer Torah on, and what do you write a mezuzah on? So Halacha L'Moshe Sinai tells us tefillin al haklaf umezuzah ala dukstus. Yeah, so that the tefillin goes on the klaf. That's the outer part of the skin, and the mezuzah is on the inner part of the skin. Klaf b'makom basar, and dukstus is b'makom seyar. The klaf is in the place of the meat, of the flesh, and the dukstus is in the place of the hair. That's where the hair is. So how can you? It's a different parchment. You're writing on different parts of the parchment, on different parts of the skin. So how can you tell me that if you ended up taking the Sefer Torah and putting it into a mezuzah, even if you're just adding a line or two, how is that going to be good? It's different parchment. Says the Gemara limitzah. It's limitzah, meaning Halacha Moshe Sinai says ideally this is how you should do it. You should write it on the outside or the inner part of the parchment. However, if you didn't do that, or let's say you made from cloth, you have cloth, the outer part, and you put it in, it's not going to prevent being valid. It'll still be valid. It's just not lechatchila. It's not the way you should do it, but if you do it, then it's fine. Okay. So the Hatanya Shina puzzle, but it says if you change, if you deviate, so then it's going to be totally invalid. So says the Gemara, that's bit tefillin. That if you have tefillin and you write them on this dukstus, then it's going to be invalid. But a mezuzah being written on cloth is good. So we thought it was a problem for us. It sounds like even a mezuzah that instead of writing on dukstus, you write on cloth is no good. We're saying no, it's only referring to tefillin. If you write tefillin on dukstus, then it's not going to be good, but not mezuzah. V'hatanya shina bein bazeh puzzle. But Bryce is saying whether you deviate in this or that, sounds like it's referring to a mezuzah. It should be invalid. Says the Gemara that no, really, ed v'ed b'tefillin. Really, it's both referring to tefillin. The hadikasvinu aklaf b'makom seyar. The hadikasvinu adukstus b'makom basar. Really, they're both referring to tefillin, and by tefillin, so tefillin you're supposed to write it on a cloth. So hadikasvinu aklaf b'makom seyar. That's good. Oh, sorry. So that's when you wrote it on the cloth in the place of the hair, which is the dukstus. That's the place of the hair. So that's why it's invalid. The hadikasvinu adukstus b'makom basar. And what's this one?
That one, even in the place of the meat.
How do you do that? How do you write a dukstus in the place of the meat if the dukstus is the place of the hair? Yeah, what does it say?
Even if it is written on the meat surface, which is indeed prescribed, they are invalid because they are written on the dukstus rather than on the cloth.
It sounds like you took apart. You took apart the skin more. One second. Really, they're both talking about tefillin. So one wrote them on cloth on the place of the hair, meaning that when you're writing on the cloth, you have to write on the surface that is closer to the meat. So the Brisa says that even if you write, you wrote the scroll on the hair surface, not the one that's closer to the meat, it's going to be invalid. Even though you're writing the tefillin on the cloth as you're supposed to, but you're writing on the wrong side of the cloth. I guess it's really like you took the skin, divided into two, and you separated it. So you have an inside and an outside, right? You have the part that was closest to the hair, the duxtus, and then you have the klaf. But even the klaf has an inside and an outside. So you have to write on the one that's closest to the meat, not the one that's closest to the hair. So if you did the one closest to the hair, even though you're writing on the klaf, it's going to be invalid. And the other one says where you actually wrote it on the duxtus in the place that's close to the meat, meaning either the outside of the inner part or the inside of the outer part. Yeah, that's how it's going to be invalid. Ask your local sofer or
Like splitting hairs.
like splitting hairs. Very good. Yeah. So that's one way to get out of this contradiction. Another answer is Shina Bazeh Ubazeh is really Tanahi. This idea of mezuzah deviating from instead of a duxtus and putting in a klaf, which we said we tried to suggest now is valid. That itself is a machlokes Tanaim. The Tanya, as the Brisa says, Shina Bazeh Bazeh Puzzle. If you switch, if you change mezuzah Sefer Torah, that's both going to be invalid. Rav Acha Machshir, Mishum Rabbi Achai, Rabbi Chanina, the Amrullah Mishum Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Chanina. If you switch, it's going to be valid because it says Hamoridin. Because he says it's going to be valid. So meaning, one opinion says the switching going both the ways is invalid. Rav Acha Machshir, that by a mezuzah switched, that is going to be valid, and that which our brisa, which said the halacha Moshe Sinai of a mezuzah being written on the duxtus, if you switch it and you go down in kedusha from a sefer Torah to tefillin, and you put that into a mezuzah, even though it's a different parchment, that's going to be valid. It itself is a debate among the Tanaim. So that question we had before we split hairs, another way to answer that is it's actually only one opinion. The other opinion invalidates both ways. Okay. So, but hold on, there's another problem. How could you tell me that going from a Sefer Torah or a tefillin by a Sefer Torah to a mezuzah is going to be valid? There's another requirement. The other Hamarid and Osin by sirtut. You have to do sirtut. So this is talking about a Sefer Torah, I believe. That each line is like there's an indent. You have to scratch it in. Each line has to be specially scratched. I don't know what word they use. Indent. It's the scoring. Yeah. Now it's like by a mezuzah or by a Sefer Torah? Sounds like by a mezuzah, no? What must be scored? A mezuzah.
Yeah,
A mezuzah has to be scored. So once again, if a mezuzah has to be scored and you're putting in, I know Rashi only picks up on tefillin, we don't find. And Sefer Torah might be different, but tefillin, we don't find it has to be scored, it has to be indented, scratched in. So therefore, how could you tell me if my tefillin got worn out, I could take out the paragraphs, cut it up, sew it up, put it into my mezuzah case, and we're good to go. Mezuzah requires a special requirement that on the parchment, you have to etch it in, scratch it in. The parchment itself has to be scored. So so it sounds like so it shouldn't be good. So the Habai Sirtot Rabbi Yumi Bar Chilki Amarav Chama Bar Guria Amarav. So they say in the name of Rav, Kol Mezuzah She'eina Misrtatet Psula. Any mezuzah that's not scored is going to be invalid. So how can you put your tefillin in the mezuzah and say it's good to go? V'Rav Minyamin Bar Chilkia Didei Amar Sirtut Shel Mezuzah Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. The sirtut of a mezuzah is a halacha l'Moshe. This indentation, pivoting, scoring is a halacha Moshe Misinai. So how could you tell me that the brisa meant that when you do go down in kedusha, it's going to be good, but we have these sources saying that it's invalid. Now, it's interesting because last time we mentioned halacha Moshe Misinai, we answered by saying it's a mitzvah. Like you don't have to do it. If you don't do it, it's fine. But here, the Gemara doesn't go with that. Maybe because we have two questions here. First of all, we have someone saying it's puzzle, and second of all, we're saying that it's halacha Moshe Misinai. So what's the answer? Tanahi. It's a machlokas Tanaim. The Tanya Rabbi Yirmiyah Omer Mishum Rabbeinu. Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Rabbeinu, tefillin and mezuzos nichtavos Shalom and aksav, the ain sheikhos sirtut. Usually the halacha is that you can't write it by memory. You have to write while looking at another script. You can't do by memory. Says Rabbi Yomi in the name of Rabbeinu, tefillin and mezuzos, nichtavos shalom and aksav. You can write those from memory. The ain tzrichos sirtut, and you do not have to score them and do the indentation. Okay. The hilchasa tefillin lo ba'yisirtut, but umezuzah ba'yisirtut. So meaning this opinion said both tefillin and mezuzah does not need sirtut. Before we said it does. You're right. It's two opinions. The halacha is tefillin lo ba'yisirtut does not need sirtut. Umezuzah ba'yisirtut, and mezuzah does require sirtut. And both of them, shalom and aksav, both of them, you're allowed to write them by memory, as opposed to a Sefer Torah. My timer, migras grisin. These are things that everyone has in their mouths, things that we know, the paragraphs of the Shema. These are things that are more readily known, therefore you could do it by heart. Not the letters, it's the lines. The lines, yeah. Now, the interesting question I saw is, what about in a Sefer Torah, the parts that are inside a tefillin and mezuzah? Can you do that by memory or not? So let's say the paragraphs of Shema when you're writing a Sefer Torah. So do you say that it's a halach about these paragraphs? If it's a halach about those paragraphs, then it should apply to a Sefer Torah as well? Or do you say that, no, it's not about the paragraphs, it's about a Sefer Torah has its halachas. You have to write it from another parchment. So and the mezuzah not. But yes, that's interesting. So okay. Amar Rav Chelbo, says Rav Chelbo, Ana Chazise le Rav Huna, I saw Rav Huna, Davi Yosef Apuria, the Sefer Torah, Aleha. I saw that he was, they changed it, not he sat. He was going to sit, the Bailam Esau. He was going to go sit on a surface, on a bench, on a bed. Apuria usually means bed. So, and there was a Sefer Torah on the bed. So what did he do? The kaf lekada ara. He turned over this some kind of pitcher on the ground. Now it was a stool for him. You can imagine, I don't know, maybe a flower vase. I don't know. He turned it over, put it on the ground, and put on there v'anach aleha Sefer Torah. And then v'hader yasa b'mita, and then he sat on his bed. 1 second. What's the problem? Why can you sit on the bed with the Sefer Torah there? You're not sitting on the Sefer Torah, right? So, Kesavar, he held Asur Leishiv al Gabe Mita, She Sefer Torah Munach Aleha. It's prohibited to sit. The halakha is like this: to sit on a bed that a Sefer Torah is on. Now, many people are strict about this when it comes to regular Sfarim, right? So, the people. So, I didn't have a chance to look it up, but it's just interesting. This is definitely referring to things that are what we call our kadosh, meaning things like a Sefer Torah or the scrolls they wrote. The scrolls they wrote, like they had their own Bereshit scroll and Shmos scroll. That's true now. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, good. We'll get there. A lot of people are offended by everything. No, I'm kidding. We're in Portland, so we have to say that, yeah. So yeah, no, but you're right. So it sounds like the halacha by Sfarim. How much is of an extension is in a nice minhag? Look it up. So the whole sefer in the Kollel about how to treat holy books. All that's interesting. Okay, this is in conflict with Upligi the Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana argues and says the Amr Rabbi Bar Chana, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Mutter leishiv al gabe mita shesefer Torah munach aleha. It is permitted to sit on a bed where a Sefer Torah is there. Now, the im lakshach adam lomer, and if you're going to say I have a story with Rabbi Lazar that proves not that way, then you misunderstood the story. It was not the way you think. Let's see. Ma'aseh Rabbi Lazar shayoshev al mita v'nizar Sefer Torah munach aleha. the nishma b'yosef agabi karka. So the story seemed to be, it was telling, it was in Kelm, they were telling, in Chelm, definitely not in Kelm. In Chelm, they would tell over, there was stories was told that Rabbi Lazar, what happened? He went to sit on a bed, he saw his Sefer Torah was there, jumped up and sat on the ground. So you see, Rabbi Lazar seems to disagree with Rabbi Chana. So he says, no, that's because something else. He sat on the ground, it looked like such a scene, like a snake just bit him. How fast he jumped out of that bed and sat on the ground was like a snake bit him. So he said, no, but it's not the way you understood the story. It's Hasam Sefer Torah al Gabe Karka Have. What happened was that the Sefer Torah was on the ground and he jumped up and he removed it from the ground. And not that it was on the bed and he jumped off the bed, it was on the ground and he jumped up. And that's why he jumped up and he had to get the Sefer Torah off the floor. That was the reaction of the Nachash. Interesting. Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. If you write a mezuzah, I think, right? Kasva igeres psula. It's going to be in and out. Now, what does it mean to write it like an igeres? So for the next little while, like I know everything Rashi says, Tosos just goes on every little point. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of differences over here. I mean, that's always true, but here it sounds like every line is like, nope, you missed it. So you write like an igeres. So Rashi says igeres means you didn't etch in the lines. A Megillah has to be like an igeres. Coming up, Purim. Halacha is written like an igeres. Has different laws how you write a Megillah than writing a mezuzah. So in igeres, you don't write with the scoring in the lines. And also Rashi says you're missing some letters or missing extra letters, like a letter. You write a letter, This makes me feel better, yeah? Those emails you write, and it's like, oh my gosh, so many typos. So yeah, you write like a letter. So it's going to be psula. Why? My time asik siva ksiva b'sefer. So Rashi learns it's a gzeira shava from actually a get is called a sefer, and here it's called a sefer. Here it says ksiva, and there it says ksiva. So we're learning out from gittin, from writing a get, that it says ksaftim al mezuzos v'kasav la sefer krisos. That's one place that it has to be precise like a get. Now, one second. Yeah, but right. So for example, Tosas Bali, we said earlier that a mezuzah needs sirtut. It's halacha Moshe Misinai that has to be etched. And here Rashi is learning out things from a get. So fine. Either way, so that's that. It has to be, you have to write exactly. You can't be missing a letter here or a letter there. That's that. Now the Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Let's say now we're about the placement of the mezuzah. So until now was the writing of the mezuzah, was the etching in the parchment, was the way the parshas were written, closed, open, space at the bottom, which parchment to use, how the parchment is scored. So in the order of things, next up is how do you place it? How do you place the mezuzah? Amar B'Amar Shmuel, Talo b'makel, you put a nail in your wall and you hang the mezuzah on the nail. So that's not good. It has to be affixed on your doorpost. How do I know? My time of b'sha'arecha, it says on your gates, on the gates, not on a bolt attached to your gates. It has to be on the doorpost, not removed from that. So Tanya Nami Hachi, Brisa supports this by saying, Tilo b'makel, if you hung it on a rod, O shehinicha achar adeles, sakana ve'ein ba mitzvah. So if you put it on a rod, and meaning you don't affix it to your doorpost, or another disagreement coming up, you put it behind your door. So not on the not on there, but you put it behind the door. So on the outside than the inside. So now Rashi says, what's the sakana? Sakana is from mazikin. Mazikin are spiritual damages. And Rashi says that your house is not protected until you put a mezuzah on your door according to halacha. So that makes room for things to come. So not good things to come. So yeah. Tosfos points out it has a few problems. And it says that when you're going to put the bolt on the outside of your door, so what's going to happen is you're going to hit your head on it. And that's a sakana. It's going to be dangerous to have a bolt coming in the back of your door. When you walk in, it can hit you in the head. Rashi is more of a spiritual sakana. Not having it protected spiritually is a problem. Shall base munbaz hamelech hayu osin b'punda kosein kain zeichel mezuzah. So basically, they went traveling and they were never in one place for more than 30 days. So you don't have to have a mezuzah, but they would still go use a mezuzah to not forget about the idea of a mezuzah. So we go to these hotels. Pundak is a hotel where you're not chayav in mezuzah because it's not your permanent residence; it's only temporary residence. But they would go and take mezuzahs with them and hang them up on some kind of rod. They didn't put it on the doorpost because it's not no halacha to do that. But they would put it up there as a remembrance for a mezuzah that they shouldn't forget, because they would always be traveling, year-long travel. You're never staying in one place. You can forget what a mezuzah is. They have the same thing by an esrog at one point. If there's no esrog available, maybe you should take something just to remember the idea of an esrog, and you shouldn't forget what esrog is. Okay.